Well, thank you. Thank you so very much, Lori, for that lovely introduction. And to you and to Kim, I have to say, someone who's been doing events for a very long time, this is spectacular. Let's give them a round of applause. I mean, the organization, fantastic. The color, the tables, the flowers, everything. The program is absolute perfection. My gratitude also, of course, goes out to the current president and all past presidents, the executive director, and a whole host of other folks who helped make this possible. I also want to thank Sheila for bringing me to the attention of JAC. Thank you so very much, Sheila. And to Linda for giving me a ride this morning. I don't know where Linda went, but we had a really terrific ride out from the city, and there were a car full of us gals there, and they were so passionate about the headlines in the Trib this morning, and the conversation was so lively, and they were zipping around and talking about this and that, and I thought, this is gonna be a fun afternoon. I love these women. They're absolutely fabulous. So I'm really excited about being here in Chicago, being with all of you here today on this extraordinary day in this beautiful venue. I want to go out and hit a few balls out on the links there. You know, this is the hometown of our president and our First Lady. So proud to have worked for them, and a former Secretary of State who's been mentioned a few times today. And I'm also very, very proud of one of the greatest mayors in the United States, Mayor Emanuel. I consider him a great friend, and for all that he has done, we are so, so very grateful. But I have to say, it's really what all of you do. That is what really needs the applause today. One of the aspects of the Joint Action Committee that I admire so much is the nature of your founding and growth as a national advocacy group committed to empowerment. So I want to yet again recognize with another round of applause the fabulous Lois Sowler for all that she did. You all see and continue to see a need for leadership in the issues you care so deeply about. And all of you, you just do it. You get it done. So much about being a woman, being women in leadership involves finding opportunities to make a difference and following through with your convictions. It's not as simple as it sounds, but diligence can make it look very easy. The Joint Action Committee, as it has evolved, is such a powerful voice in American politics, due entirely to each and every one of your efforts. If there is one great lesson that I learned in my time in DC, the power of the individual is extraordinary. Let's see if I can do this right. Wait, do I have to go like that? No. Boo. No. Hit it again. Am I looking up there? That's not it. I practiced. Boom! There we go. Okay. We've got the first slide. Much of my life in and out of public service has been about finding those openings and opportunities. I was asked today to speak about my own experiences, the path that it took to get me here, and to give a few views on the incredible power of women as leaders in today's world. There are many inspirational examples of powerful women, including every single one of you. But I have found that the power of women really revolves around the fundamentals: family, invaluable mentorship, and personal flexibility and resilience. When President Obama offered me the privileged post of Chief of Protocol, I was so honored with the opportunity to stand alongside our nation's leaders as they played host to history. There was nothing more humbling than extending my hand to a visiting Chief of State and saying, on behalf of the President of the United States, welcome to our country. Most especially because of my origin, of my American story. As the daughter of, there we go. As the daughter of 2 immigrants, I could never have dreamed that one day it would be my job to set the stage for U.S. diplomacy at the highest levels. Even though cultural interactions were a cornerstone of my personal upbringing. My father came to the United States from Croatia. My mother came from Mexico. Growing up in a great Midwestern town, Cleveland, I lived in a house that felt like, woohoo, let's hear it for Cleveland. All right. I lived in a house that felt like the United Nations, and that was, I believe, where the seeds of my interest in cultural diplomacy were planted. When we think of empowerment, we often think of finding our individual voice. But in my childhood, there were enough voices to start a chorus. In our house, you heard Croatian, Spanish, Russian, Lebanese, you name it. They were everywhere. But there was one voice in particular, that was my father's, that really provided me incomparable advice. He said to me, Capricia, life is like a tree. First you got the roots, and then the tree grows, and then you got the branches, and then there is a bud over here, and then sometimes a bud over there, and it continues on and on. You never know what is going to bloom next. Well, I took these words, kind of scratched my head a little bit, wondering what do they really mean, but I took them with me onto college and law school, and I had a career in public service and public engagement. What happened next became then the turning point of a lifetime. One of my favorite law professors turned my attention to an unknown governor from Arkansas, and my life changed forever. Looking back on those early days and joining a startup campaign for presidency, I certainly did not expect that the 24/7 sleep-deprived campaign life would one day lead to the honored position as chief of protocol. It was pretty clear from the beginning, however, that I had found one of the greatest mentors ever in Hillary Rodham Clinton. But let me tell you, our first meeting did not go very smooth. I was sent to Shreveport, Louisiana on my first campaign event, and I was there to greet her, and I had the motorcade set up at the airport, and I had the Secretary of State, then Mary Landrieu, and this wonderful friend of Hillary's called Alston Johnson, and we're all standing outside, and we're waiting for the plane to arrive, and I was in my new Brooks Brothers suit, and I was so excited, I was all starched up, and this guy from this tower yells down, he goes, "Hey, lady." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "Are you waiting for a plane?" And I said, "Yes, I am, sir." And I said, "I'm waiting for Hillary Rodham," because she went by Hillary Rodham then. And they said, "Well, I'm sorry, there are no planes coming in here today. You got to go to the other airport." Well, Alston Johnson, their good friend, he says to me, "You're horrible. You're the worst advanced person I've ever met in my life. I'm going to tell Governor Clinton all about you. I'm going to get you fired from this campaign. You're going to ruin him. You're going to ruin him." So I'm like, I haven't even started and I'm already fired. And I'm like, shit, it was terrible, it's horrible. So we all get in the car and we race on over there. And we get to the airport just in time, plane lands, hello, she gets in the car. And in those days, we drove her around. So she gets in the car with me and we're driving to all these various events. And anything that could go wrong was absolutely going wrong. There was one event where she was supposed to go up and she stands at a podium and they told me to get something called a mult box. I didn't quite know what that was. I didn't think it was very important. They just told me, make sure that the picture looks pretty. So I'm like, okay. So I took all the microphones and I tied a big bow around them and I thought, does that look pretty? Well, she walked up to the microphone, she looked at it, looked at me, and I thought, I am really fired now. We get back to the airport and thank goodness her plane broke down. And I was so happy because then we sat in the lounge and we had a good hour to just get to know one another. And of course I charmed her like crazy. But I thought to myself, lady, I said, you are so fabulous. I am tying myself to your coattails and you are not going anywhere without me. And it really started just a true friendship and the beginning of a great mentorship. I forever will be grateful for those moments in that lounge. And as we moved from the campaign trail to the White House, the First Lady, future Senator, and Secretary of State reinforced in me the lessons of my childhood, although without my great father's Croatian accent. She encouraged me and still encouraged me to find my strengths. Plant yourself where you can grow, was one of her best tidbits of advice. There isn't just one path in life. You need to await what opportunity will bloom next. learn and enhance your own individual power, and then be open to whatever experience life presents to you. So I took these lessons, and I was very pleased and excited when she and President Clinton took the ultimate chance on me and appointed me White House Social Secretary, making me the youngest in modern times. She knew, certainly more than I did, that I was capable of doing this job, and it was a very intense experience, intense 4 years. And little did I know then that this high-level anxiety position would prepare me for a path in another government position. The greatest job I'd ever had. Loved my job. Not quite sure still why I left my job, but I loved that job as Chief of Protocol of the United States, which again, Hillary knew that I would be the right person for the job, that I could do it, and that I could do it well. So I was so honored when President Obama offered me this privileged post. It was in this post that I learned only a few things about personal, professional flexibility, sometimes literally you will hear, to work through existing structures and to find new ways, new opportunities for American leadership in diplomacy. When she became our nation's top diplomat, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton immediately directed her staff to use what she referred to as smart power. By that, she meant that we should use every tool in our diplomatic toolbox to effectively engage the world. This ranged from traditional bilateral meetings and conferences to utilizing events, meals, gifts, and cultural exchange to show respect and interest in our allies, cultures, and countries. When you think of protocol, you think of those iconic images of diplomacy, handshakes in the Oval Office, historic treaty signings, state visits, and so much more. My office worked to plan every detail, making sure that all these moments not only happened, but happened perfectly, lest you see them on the front pages of the newspaper the next day. These events, interactions, moments were prepared to convey larger policy objectives. So it was critical to think through every element. But it really was the exchange of gifts that gave me and the team some of the most rewarding challenges. Many will give an eye roll and a sigh at the thought that a gift can actually be a diplomatic tool, but I assure you, it is critical when it is done right and is devastating when it is done wrong. As an example of when it's done right, in 2011, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II invited President and Mrs. Obama to a state visit. Out of all the trips that I have taken as Chief of Protocol, this visit was particularly special to me. I had gone to the peaks of protocol. Walking through Buckingham Palace, I was just in awe of the moment. And let me assure you that Her Majesty is her own Chief of Protocol. She would walk through and she'd say, Mr. President, pointing to her watch, move along, we're running late. And I felt like it was like a bit of Downton Abbey suddenly, there I was. And to honor this moment, we worked incredibly hard to think of just the right gift that the President and Mrs. Obama could present to Her Majesty and others who were in what they called the suites. So after the arrival at Buckingham Palace, and she's walking along, and all I could do is keep staring at that purse. What's in the bag? I was dying to know, what does she have in the bag? Should we take the bag? Should we offer to hold the bag? And they would say, do not touch the bag. Go nowhere near the bag. And I was like, it only makes me want to know, really, what's in the bag? I really want to know what's in the bag. So we move through, and she escorts the President and Mrs. Obama and the suites into lunch, and they go behind these enormous doors. So the doors slide closed, and there are these long tables that are set forth. And we get to the task of presenting our gifts and primping, and I'm looking over at theirs, what do they give us? And they're looking over at us, and they're kind of like, what are they giving us? And at this precise moment, the doors come open, and again, out walks Her Majesty. Move along, Mr. President, move along. And so they get to the tables, and she presents the gifts to the President, and very, very lovely. And then I'm standing alongside the President and kind of like, this is what we did, remember, this is what we're giving. And I'm sort of cueing him. And we walk up, and Her Majesty, now what we had learned that she had, just an in particular fondness for anything that was about her father's travels throughout the world, an avid collector. And so we worked with Harvey Weinstein, who had just produced the movie, The King's Speech. And in that, if you know the movie, that's all about her father. And so we found these amazing original menus and original tickets and photographs, just all of this original memorabilia, and we put it together in this lovely leather portfolio, and she was so touched. Oh, Mr. President, this is lovely. Thank you, thank you. And I could tell she really meant it, and I was so happy. And then we moved along, and she looked down the way there, and she said, "Oh, Philip," and she called over to Prince Philip, "Look what they've got your ponies." And we had learned through our research as well that Prince Philip was into racing carriage ponies. And so we reached out to an artisan in Colorado and one in Ohio, and they crafted these special bits and shanks for his carriage ponies. And on the ends, we soldered the president's seal. And so he brings them over, and he looks at them, and he picks it up, and he goes, "These are gonna break my pony's jaws." And I was like, "Ah!" The president looks at me like, "Good job, like great." And I'm like, "Oh no." And so she's like, nonsense. And so she calls over this really tall man who I guess is the head of the horses, and he walks over and he picks it up. He goes, "Oh, this is excellent workmanship, Your Majesty, excellent workmanship." She goes, "I told you, Philip." I was like, phew, Queen saves the day. So she then looks down the table a bit and she says, "And who are the bushes for?" And so we walk down and we describe that the bucket that you see there, that the planter that the seedlings are in, that was made out of wood that we collected on the the White House grounds, the south grounds of the White House. This was from a fallen tree, from the Jackson magnolia. And we then collected seedlings from Monticello and Mount Vernon, and we put those all together knowing that he is an environmentalist. And as well, we included some White House honey from the south grounds. And so we walked, "Oh, this is lovely, I have honey too," Prince Charles says. And we said, "Oh, yes, indeed." And then, of course, Prince Philip has to come over, and he's like, "Well, I have some honey too." And, it became like a bit of a honey off, like everybody's, tasting the honey, and whose honey's better. And so it was a really wonderful moment, but I kid you not, that about 15, 20 minutes later, I went down to what they call the staff hold, and on the television, there was an anchor, and the anchor says, "Americans get it right. Her Majesty very pleased with gifts." And it could have devastated the visit if we had gone wrong. So thank goodness it all went really right, and she seemed very, very pleased. We did you proud, America. But the idea of bringing a unique piece of our great nation to another was the focus of one of my last trips with President Obama. I had the honor of accompanying President Obama to Israel for his meeting with President Shimon Peres and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was such a great visit, so rich in history, and I absorbed every single moment of it. When we received the schedule, we had learned that President Obama was going to visit the president's personal home and his garden, and we had learned so much about this garden. And so we said, well, we have to bring a tree that came from the Jackson magnolia. So we went out, we picked, of course, the biggest tree that we could actually get onto Air Force One physically, and we brought that for presentation. The president was so pleased with the idea of this because he had also, when he was senator, had visited this garden and knew of how special it was to President Peres. And so we brought that out there, and President Obama, I wanted to share with you what he said shortly after the planting. For me, to be able to bring a tree from the United States that will find a home in that garden, I think is symbolic of not only the friendship between our two nations, but between the two of us personally. It was so clear from that moment that President Peres was so touched and honored by this gift, and that the President of the United States was very proud of where it was planted, because it was planted next to the tree of olive and figs. If you know that area, it's very symbolic, and so that was a real gesture of friendship. The foundations of protocol are time-honored and vital to the diplomatic process, but 21st century leadership demanded that we be open to growth within the framework. We worked to develop new ways that we could showcase America's cultural assets to visiting dignitaries and, by extension, exhibit our influence. By formalizing the Diplomatic Partnership Division within the Office of Protocol, we were able to better engage with the foreign diplomatic community in Washington. We launched programs like Experience America, which we kicked off right here in Chicago with your former mayor, the Honorable Richard Daley. We brought the ambassadors to see the fantastic architecture, taste the fabulous Chicago food, and meet the wonderful people of Chicago. And then we took them around the rest of the country, to Atlanta, Alaska, New Orleans, Arkansas, you name it, we brought them there. And what we were attempting to do was create new relationships, take them outside of the Beltway, allow them to get to know the real America and make relationships with all Americans. And it really proved very beneficial in the end. Additionally, we had another program that was called Diplomatic Culinary Partnership, where we brought talented chefs from all over the United States together to talk about the unique American cuisine, our American talent. And of course, we are ultimately the grand melting pot in the United States. So it was a wonderful, exciting opportunity. And here, we have a photograph of Secretary Clinton with the Vice President greeting then Vice President Xi Jinping before we knew that he was going to become president of China. And we brought in a very special chef. This is Ming Tsai of Boston to prepare that afternoon state luncheon. Well, he was so touched when he heard this gesture. His eyes lit up, and the two of them just began to engage in Mandarin. It was just a really spectacular, spectacular moment. And of course, I had to learn not only to be adaptable in the framework of protocol, but sometimes unexpectedly, to be physically flexible when the situation required. So, imagine this. On the night of the state visit of President Calderon of Mexico and Mrs. Zavala, I began my role, as I usually did, leading the President and the First Lady through the various steps of the visit. Well, and please do remember, I am part Mexican. So, my entire Mexican family in Cleveland, Ohio is watching this live on television, waiting to see me standing graciously next to the President of Mexico. Well, as I began to descend the North Portico steps in my lovely pink, isn't that a lovely dress, pink Oscar de la Renta gown, my skinny Manolo heel did me in. And yes, down I went. You could hear "ay caramba" all the way from Cleveland. My entire family was shielding their eyes in embarrassment. Now, who is to reach out to me? The president, not the Secret Service, not the military. And Mrs. Obama is yelling to the cameras, "Don't take that picture." Meanwhile, 300 cameras are madly clicking away and blinding me with their flashlights. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Well, I thought back again on what, Hillary had said to me many years ago. It's not how you go down, it's all about how you get back up. So I got back up and I continued on with the duty at hand. But for your personal enjoyment, and if you really want to see this further, just Google Capricia Marshall Fall Remix, and you can see me going down and up to some fun, funky music. My son likes to use that when he's in big trouble. But this also was the gift that kept on giving, because every time I walked with the president out to the North Portico and he was standing right behind me, he sort of put his head right in my neck and he'd say, "Will she go down or will she stay up?" And thankfully, Mrs. Obama was right behind him saying, "Brock, leave her alone, leave her alone." As I said in the Washington Post the next day, as a proud Mexican-American, this historic day at the White House moved me in ways I never anticipated. Well, that was just a peek behind the curtain for a Chief of Protocol of the United States. It was a job that I loved, falls and all. But a fall certainly doesn't have to be quite so literal. Looking back to the aftermath of the 2008 campaign, there were several fabulous young women who are trying to work their way through finding a job in Washington, D.C. It's really daunting, and sometimes it becomes pretty depressing. I knew their value, and I knew the government, so I set forth a personal campaign to buoy them up and help them on their way. And looking back today, our president, our secretaries of state, and our country were really lucky to have them in the government. It was my duty to remind them, as Secretary Clinton had reminded me, that even when you're down, you always need to figure out a way to get back up and look for another opening, look for another opportunity. My path through this expansive forest of public service has been an unexpected one, but I am reminded every day how lucky we are to have women in government who have seen their own openings and taken them. Women like Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, who was here earlier today, have found their passions in their career and have taken every step to follow them, implementing changes that will affect the lives of millions. The women I have worked for and with during my career are a testament to the progress we've made in the last several decades. In 2008, then Senator Hillary Clinton spoke of 18 million cracks in the glass ceiling. Increasingly, we are learning that the glass ceiling won't be shattered in some pivotal moment, but rather we must keep working towards its disintegration. These barriers won't be gone until we see a woman in every level of every industry and endeavor. Instead of pursuing an obituary on the old boys club, we should be making certain that women are equally represented in all facets of the American experience, in all elements of the American dream. There aren't enough of us in every level of government yet. That's changing with every election and every graduating class. But what has been gained easily can be lost. That is why the work of the Joint Action Committee is so critical. As leaders in our respective communities, we have the power to guide the conversation. We have the duty to help each other with our collective voices in local and national dialogues on a host of issues that drive us. In such an important midterm election year, we are reminded of the values under assault. It is our responsibility to see our opening, recognizing the opportunity here where the power of women can really show. Organizations like the Joint Action Committee guarantee that the tide of women's power in the electoral process continues to flow without ebbing. Each of us are reminded that there is always more work to be done, more to gain, more to achieve for this great nation of ours, and how the power of one can make the difference. So I urge you all to continue the amazing work that you are doing. I know that you love this country of ours as much as I do, with all of its potential and endless possibilities. So it is our duty to remember, pay it forward. Like Lois, create and maintain a laser diligence on the issues that you are passionate about. Help someone find their voice and search for those openings where you can make a difference. The power of women at its core is about ways in which we can create a better life for the next generation. We know there's a mountain or two yet to climb, and maybe there might be a few falls, but with each other's support, with our collective power, we can, together, step it up. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all very much for coming today.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.